Greetings, founders. Welcome to Feel the Boot, the science of startups. I'm your host, Lance Cottrell, and I'm here to help you navigate the nearly vertical learning curve you're going to encounter during your startup journey. I know I've been there myself, and I have helped countless other founders through this process. Today, I want to talk about a number of insights that I've developed over 25 years in this space. These are some of the things that were the hardest won knowledge that I picked up, or really great ideas that others shared with me along the way, and I want to pass them along to you. It is critical to validate all of your assumptions. Never just go with your gut. Test, and test again. I have, in countless cases, been totally confident that I understood what I was doing and I knew the outcome of a certain thing would be. And it turned out I was completely wrong. I talk about this a lot when developing your pitch deck. Make sure that you tell the investors what you validated and that you have done it. But it really applies all the time. For example, when I was coming out with the first application version of Anonymizer, my company's internet privacy service, I thought, I'm the perfect customer. I represent our customers, right? I'm a privacy passionate guy. They're joining me because they're privacy passionate. Surely I can build a tool that's just what I want. And so we did. We built this amazing application with all kinds of fine-grained control, so you could go in and pick exactly what information got shared with which websites under what conditions. You had absolute control over how your privacy was handled. And it was a disaster. The users hated it. None of them used any of the features. Quite frankly, I wasn't even a good model for me. I didn't use most of the features. So we spent some time talking to customers and understanding what do they actually want? How did they want to use our tool? What kind of experiences did they want to have? And the answer was they didn't want much of an experience. What they wanted was an on button and an off button. So they either were private or not private. Everything else was just too much mental load to take care of. And that product was, in fact, a really big hit. So at the end of the day, you can't navel gaze your way to truth. You need to get out there and get real data to be confident in the decisions you're making. And do it early so you avoid having to redo everything. Right? The mistake I made cost us a huge amount of time and money to rebuild the entire application from scratch. Don't make my mistake. It is effectively impossible to over-communicate. When you're talking to your employees or to investors or to customers, you may think you're communicating a lot, but the reality is probably not nearly as much as you should be. People are hungry for information, feedback, status. And if you're not sharing that with them, then they need to guess. They need to make assumptions. And the reality is silence and darkness don't fill with kittens and puppies. They fill with demons and brimstone, right? People always draw negative conclusions when they're trying to guess what's going on. So always be communicating to your team, to everyone else. What are your priorities? Where are you coming from? What are you working on? What are the issues you're all facing? The more you communicate, the more you can make sure that everyone on your team is pulling in the same direction. And when someone needs to make some kind of a decision, they're making that in the full context of everything that's going on, and ideally would make the same kind of decision that you would in their shoes. As a founder, everything you say to your employees gets amplified 1,000-fold. It's like you think you're whispering and your team feels like you're shouting through a megaphone. This is something that I didn't realize myself, but actually one of my partners cued me in on this, that I thought I was just having a conversation with my employees. And this doesn't really apply to the founding team, but once you start to build out the larger team, you're the founder. That is, especially in our culture, this almost godlike position. And so everything you say comes with that thundering voice of God vibe behind it. And this causes all kinds of problems. Like when you are floating an idea in front of the team in a meeting, you may think you're saying, hey, I've got this idea that I just came up with, let's bat it around a little bit. But that's not how it comes through the team. It's like, our fearless leader has bestowed on us this concept. And typically they won't give you feedback. I really realized this was a problem when I'd go into a meeting with a totally half-baked idea, and I'm looking for people to improve it, and everyone's nodding their head as I'm talking. And I know for a fact the idea is not that good. Someone should be giving me some feedback. And the reason is, I'm the founder, and there's that level of deference. So you need to learn to take even more heat off the ball. Your feedback, your criticism, the way you frame ideas, when you talk in a meeting, all of that needs to be adjusted to be as low key as you can make it. Right? When you talk about an idea, you really need to go to extreme lengths to emphasize how this is a hypothesis, an idea that you want to explore, something that's only partially formed, and then maybe you can get that feedback. This is also part of the reason why it's hard to get the truth about problems in the company, because no one wants to tell the big guy that they've screwed up or that there's some underlying problem, or maybe that the big guy had a bad idea. So the more you can try to humanize yourself, the better you'll do. Networking is not schmoozing. Networking is not the thing that happens in those mixers where you've got a glass of wine and maybe some little finger sandwiches and you're passing out business cards. I mean, there may be some incidental networking that happens there, and that's why I think we have this negative association with it, or at least I certainly did. I hated the idea of networking until I realized that it is in fact just making connections, literally building a network. So when you're going out into the world, you want to be sharing with everyone you encounter what you're doing, what you're passionate about, and what you need, and see if they can help in some way. Maybe it's a direct aid, maybe it's with some other introduction. And in return, you want to be seeing if you can be of help to them, because reciprocity, if you help someone else, they're more likely to help you. And you never know when this will happen. So you want to be networking in this sense constantly. When you're in the dentist and the dental hygienist is cleaning your teeth, when you get a chance to say something, talk about the business you're starting and the fact that you're looking for a part-time CFO, or you need a new developer or a co-founder, because they may have a cousin or uncle, niece, someone that they know who might fit the bill, or who would know who would fit the bill. I had an interesting example where I was out wine tasting, and my wife's a novelist, and so we were talking about that with a woman who was pouring our drinks. And she said, oh, it turns out one of her closest friends is this well-known literary agent. And she was able to introduce us, and that was an incredibly valuable relationship, which we never would have gotten if we hadn't been talking to this random person in a wine tasting room. As another example of how you never know who's going to have the right answer for you, there came a point in Anonymizer where my board of directors suggested that I should probably hire in a CEO with some real business experience so I could focus on the technology more. And I thought that was a great idea, so I reached out to a whole bunch of contacts, including my real estate agent. And this was the guy who'd gotten us our office space and specialized in leasing office space to tech startups. So he knew everyone in the industry, and it was one of these super networked people. Good to identify them. I told him what I wanted, what kind of characteristics I needed to find in a CEO, what kind of experience, and literally the next day, I had 4 amazing resumes land on my desk, one of whom I eventually hired in as CEO. As founder and CEO, selling is your primary job. I was very uncomfortable with the whole idea of selling early on. I came from a technical background, and culture and movies and other media give us this idea that selling is this kind of smarmy, used car salesman kind of experience, and something I definitely wanted to distance myself from. And it really set me back a lot. It took me a long time to overcome that and embrace the need to be selling and realize that it was in fact my core duty, especially as the company grew and I didn't need to be hands on keyboard anymore. You're almost only selling. You're selling your employees and your team on your vision and the direction you're going and the fact that they want to be part of this company and be successful. You're trying to sell investors or potential investors on the value of the company and how you're going to increase in value and how your vision will be fulfilled. You're trying to sell customers, obviously, on your products and solutions. You're trying to sell the media on how interesting a story you can pitch to them, that the reason they should be covering you. It's always trying to basically seduce all of these different people to adopt the vision that you have for the company and to believe in this idea that you're trying to create. It's really all selling, and it's critical that you come to embrace that. People don't want to hear about features. They want to hear about benefits. Again, one of those things that took me a long time to really internalize. Especially as technical founders, a lot of us have an instinct to want to talk about our technology, to get into the nuts and bolts of the tools that we're using and how this thing interacts with that, what the tech stack is, and all the little nifty details and capabilities that we've built into our product. But in reality, other people generally don't care. Your customers care about how this helps them do something. How does this fit some hole in their life or allow them to achieve more or to achieve it cheaper or to achieve it faster, right? Those are the things they care about, and they care about the things they care about. You need to be speaking to those. And when that comes down to a sales pitch or an investment pitch, fundamentally it's about benefits over features. So not, we have this amazing hyper widget, but the hyper widget allows you to do this, or we enable you to accomplish this. Doesn't really matter how, right? To your customer, it doesn't matter if you have hamsters on steroids in some microscopic wheel that are powering everything behind the scenes. It fundamentally doesn't matter at all, as long as those hamsters are producing some useful output that the customer desires. This features over benefits manifests most often in the competition slide. So go back, look at your pitch deck, and make sure that you're talking about why your product benefits your customers more than your competitors' products benefit them, not that you just check more feature boxes that maybe no one cares about. It's incredibly important to take the time to understand the person across the table from you, the person you're trying to talk to present to convince to buy from you, whatever it may be. You want to understand, what do they care about? What do they need? What do they fear? What problems are they likely to run into? How will this actually benefit them in the way their business really works? You need to be able to get way down into their head and into their business so you have a deep understanding of all aspects of how they're going to think about the thing you're presenting. This came home to me hard when I first became an angel investor, and I realized why I'd struggled to raise money for so long. Because suddenly, sitting on the investor side of the table, it was immediately clear to me what things I cared about. And like a thunderbolt, I realized I hadn't been talking about those things when I was trying to raise money. So I'd go into a VC and I'd talk about things on my agenda, and they'd nod along politely, but we didn't get the check, because it didn't tell them the things they needed to know to make the decision. And things worked out okay in the end, but sales, all sorts of areas would have gone much better if I'd realized much earlier to talk in terms of their mental state. And this really applies to all forms of communication. Of course, it applies to pitch decks, but it applies to marketing emails. It applies to your website. Right? When you're creating some page on the website, maybe a landing page, you need to understand who's getting there. How did they get there? What do they know about you or the problem set or your company or your solution at that moment? And then craft the web page to specifically address that understanding. Style and aesthetics matter. This was a huge frustration to me, particularly with scientific background. I want to believe that the logic of my argument, the superiority of my product would carry the day and, convince people of the correctness of whatever proposition I'm trying to argue. And the universe just doesn't work that way. The outer superficialities carry a huge amount of weight. How you look, how you sound, how you stand, how you speak and present yourself, the tone of your voice, the graphics on your PowerPoint or your keynote deck, the layout of your web page, the fonts you use, the colors, the images, all of those things carry a huge amount of weight. And in fact, many studies show that more of a person's impression about your presentation or anything else comes from those softer factors, from the tone, from the visuals, than it does from the actual content. And so it can often be a subconscious effect, but if things feel shoddy or slipshod or poorly put together, that then kind of casts a pall over everything to do with you and your company. And any information you provide, any presentation you're given, is seen through that lens of this sort of shoddy, poorly put together thing. It gives everything sort of a poop-colored taint, as opposed to if everything's nice, if it's tight, if it's pretty, if everything's delivered professionally, all those little details look good, then that sort of puts a golden glow around everything. And in fact, your product may end up being perceived as far superior to how it actually is. You don't scale, and delegation is painful. At the beginning in a startup, you and your co-founder are doing literally everything. And as you grow the team. More people are coming in because you can't scale a company with just you. There's no way that you can just become more and more productive and be 1,000 times as effective as you were when you first started, right? You're going to need to bring in thousands of people, ideally at some point. The problem comes when you're bringing them in. You've been doing this in the company. You've been writing the code or doing the PR, whatever things you were doing at the early stages. You probably do them well. When you hire someone, you almost certainly do them better than that person will, right? Especially early on, you're probably not able to hire someone with a huge amount of experience, but also they don't know the company, they don't know the product. So you're going to bring someone in and they're going to do worse than you are. And that will drive you insane. At least if you're anything like me, it certainly drove me insane. And if you want them to get good at it, you now need to actually stop what you're doing and train them. Right? You need to not just have them doing a bad job, but you're not even doing the other jobs that you have for a while as you bring them up to speed. Yet this is critical, right? If you don't do that, then the company can't grow because you don't scale. It's a little like the old story of saw sharpening, where if you're trying to saw down a bunch of trees, it feels inefficient to stop sawing and sharpen that saw. But in fact, taking that step allows you to cut down a lot more trees. In fact, this process of taking off hats, of delegating responsibility to other people, was to me kind of the core experience of being a founding CEO. That you start with all the hats and all the responsibility, and the key to scaling is how fast can you give those things away? And if you're hiring the right people, even though it's painful in the early days, they will quickly be better at the job than you were. Partly because you're hiring people who are better than you are at those things, and partly because they're able to focus on that one thing, whereas you were trying to do everything at once. And you're going to be delegating more and more meta responsibilities, right? So you start off by delegating, here, go write this piece of code, go do this sale. And later on, you're delegating to people to even do the management side of things, to run whole parts of your business, and delegating large decision-making authority to people. Again, because you have to. Embrace it. Running a startup is a marathon, and there may not be a big prize at the end. Right? This is a multi-year process. 5 years is a pretty early exit, 7's common, 10's not unusual. I was 13, and that's not an exceptionally long time to your exit. You need to make sure that that's an enjoyable and survivable process. Right? Make sure that the individual days are fun. A lot of people in startups are just killing themselves for that end of the rainbow exit. You know, if I just do 100-hour weeks for 5 years, I'll eventually have this huge amount of money and can buy my own island. But realistically, there's what, 10-ish% chance of having a really stellar exit at the end of the day, which means there's a 90% chance that you won't. So if you're not enjoying and learning the whole time, this can be a pretty poor outcome for you. So make sure that the journey is good the whole way along. And part of that is maintaining mental and physical health. Right? Take care of yourself. For me, it meant setting some boundaries. For example, I picked a couple of priorities. I wanted to have dinner with my family almost every night. Right? Unless I was traveling or there was a really critical meeting, and there couldn't be very many of those, I was going to be home for dinner. I also made sure that I got a good night's sleep every night. I don't function well without sleep. Some people seem to do better. That's not me. Getting that sleep made sure that I was going to be effective the next day, happy, thinking clearly. And so while all-nighters happen, they probably happen for me less than once every other year, because I wasn't going to let them. That was one of my hard lines. And then on the physical side, making sure that you're getting exercise. So for me, I worked out in the morning, I had an elliptical machine at my house, but more importantly, I took up Kung Fu. And so I'd go to the Kung Fu studio several nights a week and yell and hit things and break boards and kick pads and sweat a lot and focus on that thing so intently. And it was such a way of getting away from the business. I'm not thinking about the startup at all when I'm doing that. And I'm letting out a huge amount of stress and, again, getting some good exercise. It's really a cathartic thing for me. And that helped keep me sane so that when I went into the business, I could give off a good positive attitude. Because if it's getting you down, that will infect everyone else, right? Your bad attitude will poison the entire organization. Whereas, if you're taking care of yourself, you're positive, you're feeling good, you're enjoying the whole process, that also radiates through the entire organization and will help everyone else feel more positive and good about the business. And it's just more fun to be happy, right? So enjoy the journey. Thanks for watching this episode of Feel the Boot. I hope you found it useful and interesting, and if so, please like, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you've been watching a lot of these, I'd also appreciate it if you could share it with your community. Share this with other founders. I'm trying to help as many people as I possibly can. If you'd like to get one-on-one advising, go to feeltheboot.com and join our mailing list. I include a link to get one-on-one coaching with me in every single email. You can also meet other founders who are on the same journey over at the Feel the Boot Founders Alliance on Facebook. I'll put both those links down in the description. Until next time, ciao.